Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Days at Dogwood Canyon. Today, I have a special guest with me all the way from North Carolina, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us where she works. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hannah.Pursley. I am the Forest Program Manager for Audubon North Carolina, which is our local state office that helps our several volunteer chapters throughout the state.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm very excited today to talk to you about a interesting program you guys have started called Urban Forestry Program. And before we could jump into that, can you tell us a little bit about what that means? Like, what is an urban forest?
So I like to define an urban forest as its connection to people. So when you think of an urban forest, you would typically think of, where the people are. So everything from street trees along the road, your local parks and greenways, the trees there, your backyard, if there's any sort of state or national forest that, people go and recreate in, things like that. So I like to include all those things under the big umbrella of urban forestry. And obviously the further away from urban centers into the rural area, that kind of becomes rural forestry. So think about, pine plantations, game lands, things like that would be considered more rural. But I would say that urban forestry kind of depends on its interaction with people.
Okay, that's a great definition. Thank you. Okay, so in the article that I read on National Audubon's website, it did say that statistics say that North Carolina is actually losing urban forestry faster than any other state. Do we know why that is? What's contributing to that?
So it would definitely be a couple of different reasons, kind of all combining into one massive hit to our urban forest, unfortunately. Over the past few years, North Carolina's economy has been growing significantly. It's become a really attractive place for people to move to. So we have a huge influx of, migrants from other states. I want to say I recently read a USA Today article that we have the third highest net migration for the country right now in 2024, which is pretty crazy. And I've seen tons of articles about like North Carolina's, top 10 best place to move to. It's one of the most corporate friendly, which means a lot of other things that I don't necessarily think are good things, but that's a whole nother story. And besides the economic aspect of the rapid urbanization of our state, with people, lots of development happening to keep up with this influx of people moving to our state. So, the housing demand, lots of apartments going up, storage facilities, new roads, all that infrastructure is happening because we have all these people moving to North Carolina. But one of the other reasons that makes North Carolina an attractive place to move to, besides, your job or you have family here, is the natural beauty that our state has. A lot of other states do have mountains and a coast, which is not a strictly unique thing, but North Carolina takes a lot of pride in our natural heritage as far as, in the western part of the state, the Blue Ridge Mountains, in places like Asheville and our other mountain towns like Boone, and then traversing across the Piedmont, our lovely oak hickory forests and things like the Uhari forests, and moving all the way to the coast, we have the beautiful Outer Banks, which is pretty nationally recognized with our barrier islands, down south to, Wilmington, which is the like a 70-mile radius around Wilmington is the only place where Venus flytraps grow natively, which is pretty interesting. A lot of people think, they would be in a tropical forest somewhere in the Amazon, but they grow natively, and there was actually a really huge problem with people poaching them from the wild. Even though they can buy, nursery ones at like Lowe's.
Yeah, probably easier to get to as well.
Sorry, I probably got a little bit off topic.
That's okay. No, that's a wonderful description of your state. So I can see why people are moving there. And I'm actually located in the DFW area. So we feel a little bit of your pain there with the migration of other state residents. We have a lot of that going on as well. So obviously that outgrowth or the people coming in is taking away from the space that you guys are able to have for your urban forestry is what it kind of sounds like.
Yeah. And then it is also impacting, we're losing a lot of our agricultural lands as well.
Oh,
that's another big issue that's also happening. Kind of, if it's not forests being cut down, it's loss of, traditionally agricultural farms, smaller local family farms, things like that.
Yeah.
Which is another big issue.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys have developed a program to help kind of combat this. So tell me about your urban forestry program.
So we are trying to tackle urban forestry in a couple different ways, ranging from, technical assistance on my end. We get a lot of people emailing the state office saying like, hey, like, I know the woods across from my house have, woodpeckers and, warblers and things like that. And it's up for sale and the developers might cut it down. Like, what can I do? And so lots of community outreach, providing resources to both the public and our chapters. We really want to be a resource for people to come to when they're not really sure what's going on in their community, or they have concerns about their urban forest in their community. Because time and time again, the trees that are where we live, not only have environmental benefits, holistic benefits for, your mental health, for the climate, erosion control, water protection, things like that. It's also like, it's just nice to look at. It increases property value. It can help save energy if you have nice, big, mature trees, shading your home. That's less AC you have to pay for, things like that. But so besides, the technical aspect of like, hey, I have, this tree in my backyard, or I have these trees in my backyard, but I'm not really seeing too many birds. What can I do to attract more birds?
Nice.
Things like that. And then the resources to the chapters help the chapters with like action alerts. Like recently we helped the Wake Audubon chapter, which is the Wake County local chapter of Audubon. They had a group of people who called themselves the Oak Folks. And they all showed up to a city council meeting wearing green and all spoke about the need for more urban forest protections. And so they actually got the city council to agree that there was a need for a urban forestry tree protection master plan.
Nice.
And so some people from the Oak Folks are going to be like kind of a consulting party with the city council to determine, what goes into that plan when it's made. And so we did a lot of the comms, reach out for that. Not me personally. We do have a comms associate and in engagement director, excuse me. But like pushing out things like that, making our chapters aware of what is going on in their community for things like new laws, ordinances, and unified development ordinances that are up for, comment if they're looking to change anything, things like that. So letting our chapters become aware of things like that. Obviously, you know, native plants are best when we can do them. So advocating
Right.
for cities to adopt, you know, native plants policies or getting them to change their approved plant list to remove, you know, non-natives and or invasive species and swap them with native species, things
Nice.
like that. Well, go ahead.
No, that's great. It sounds like you guys are really setting yourselves up to be a really good resource for information for people who want to do something. And that's amazing that you guys are out there. And if somebody is calling saying, "Hey, there's woodpeckers across my street, what do I do to help?" I love that people are willing to do that and contact you. So I think it's very cool that you're focusing on actually working with an urban forestry program and your various chapters. So if the public wants to get involved, how do they contact you, or how do they find information about a chapter near them so that people can get their feet in there?
So there's a couple different ways the public can get involved. We here in North Carolina, we do have a urban forestry network call once a month where we invite any sort of, you know, people in chapters who are particularly interested in urban forestry, you know, industry professionals, city employees, you know, Forest Service people. North Carolina, we also have like the Wildlife Resources Commission. So like we've had people from there come to the calls, and we just kind of discuss, you know, current events, what's happening in their communities, wins, losses, you know, things that we can describe as, you know, this was more effective, but this wasn't. Does anyone have any contacts? It's mostly like just networking and making everyone kind of aware of what's happening all across the state. So that happens once a month. We sometimes have guest speakers come. We've had a lovely lady come and do a presentation on the Green Growth Toolbox, which was made by the North Carolina Forest Service, things like that. And then we also have, obviously, our webpage on our Audubon North Carolina website. We have a new urban forestry page, which will be where all urban forestry related news, blog posts, resources will live in perpetuity going forward as long as my position exists. If they're interested in reaching out to me directly, it's my name, which is Hannah, HANNAH .Pursley, PURSLEY at Audubon.org. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if you just want to say hi, I welcome that too.
Wonderful. Well, that is very cool. I am going to put some links in our show notes for all of the things that you talked about. So hopefully you'll get even more people coming to your monthly meetings. And that Green Growth Toolbox also sounds very interesting. So I'll leave links for people to go to in our show notes. So once they're done listening to our great conversation, then they can check that out. And I just want to say thank you very much, Hannah, for joining me today. Is there any last thoughts you would like to leave with our listeners?
Any last thoughts? I mean, obviously, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is today.
I love that
proverb.
That's amazing. I love that. That's great.
And then also, North Carolina is the first Audubon state office that has an urban forestry related position. A lot of Audubon's previous forestry work has done a lot with actual foresters, land management plans, you know, working with state forests and national forests and things like that. But we can only, as my boss would like to say, I'll leave it with this, is we can only protect and conserve and tweak the last best places so much. Right. And if we're only focused on those spots and we're not really focusing on where we're losing our forest the fastest, which is our urban forest, it's always going to be a net negative for our forest. So that's part of the reason why Audubon North Carolina is transitioning to working a lot with urban forestry, because we do want to help save North Carolina's urban forest before it's all gone.
I think that's great. And I love that you're kind of a pioneer for this. Hopefully more Audubon state level organizations will get an urban forestry person as well.
Yes, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little intimidating. It's a little scary. We're still definitely figuring out where the most need is and what's the most effective and getting feedback from our communities. So it's still definitely like a work in progress.
Well, I am super
doing it.
Yay, good. I'm super excited to see what you guys have in your future. And thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.